Hi, good evening to all of you.
Hi, Doctor.
Hi, so can all of you see my slide now?
And
Okay, good. So uh, now we have 13 of you in this platform. So another 7 more to go. So I will just wait for 1 or 2 minutes. Then I will start my class. Yeah. So right. So let us start our class. Before that, I would like to let you know that next Monday, you will have lab session on demonstrations for the oil refining process. So one of my master student working on palm oil refining project, she will share with you the setup of a refinery unit, a lab scale unit. So I'm going to book the BKS one next to my lab so that while you can go in group, but you will need to wait in that classroom to get your turn to enter the lab because the uh, setup is rather small, so we cannot handle all students at one go. All right. So we are going to have the lab session start at 9. Is it clear?
yes, Doctor.
Okay. So on top of that, next Monday, I would like to ask you about the arrangement for the virtual class. So next Monday, I will have class in the afternoon session as well at Nong Nam University in Ho Chi Minh City. So I would like to ask about whether we can have it in the evening on Monday, 8 to 10, or um, you would like to have it just like today, Thursday, 8 to 10 p.m. So any comment or suggestion? Which one that you all prefer? Monday, 8 to 10, or p.m. evening, or Thursday, 8 to 10 p.m.? So all of you agree on Monday? So I assume that if there is no comment and objection, we will go on with Monday, 8 to 10 p.m. for our virtual class. Okay, so now, all right, back to the lecture session. This Monday, we start to talk about specialty fats. which is also an interesting.
Doctor,
Yes.
sorry for disturbing. Do you mention that next Monday from 8 to 10 we will have class?
Yes.
But actually for my schedule I have class from 9 straight until 10 p.m.
Oh, you mean until at night 10 p.m. right?
My class from morning 9 a.m. to evening 7 p.m. So is that okay to not have class on Monday?
Yeah. So then if I'm asking whether Thursday is it okay? So how about other students?
For me, I prefer Thursday.
So all of you, other than that, okay with Thursday class?
Sorry, doctor. Sorry, doctor. Monday okay, because the class cancel already.
Okay. All right.
Sorry, doctor.
All right. So we go back to Monday schedule. Yeah? So right after this class, I will share with you the link. Yeah. All right. So sorry for that so-called uncertainty because of my 2 weeks class in Nong Nam University. Yeah. So now back to this particular topic. We still have a few more slides to go on, specifically for ice cream-based product. So we have covered a series of specialty fats, such as confectionery fats, such as cocoa butter alternative, such as fats for non-dairy product and so on. So now we go on with the last part, which is on specialty fat for ice cream. So for ice cream, it will require a little bit different type of specialty fats based on different parts of the ice cream. So of course, if you take a look at the body of ice cream, or we usually call ice cream mess, so type of fat functions is slightly different from ice cream for coating or ice cream for dipping or topping. Okay, the fat, specialty fat required for all these three different part of ice cream is relatively different. So we will go into each one of them. All right. First, if you take a look at ice cream mess, the body of ice cream, fat is not a continuous phase. It is usually in a form of emulsion. So fat is only about 5 to 15% of the overall portions of the ice cream mess. So water, sugar, protein, flavoring compounds, or it can also have some solid food like solid fruits, such as strawberry ice cream. You may have strawberry mess or pineapple, coconut, some of those solid. But of course, for specialty fat, we would like to only concentrate on fat itself. So fat play a very important role on overall quality of the ice cream mix. So it provides ice cream the hardness, melting behavior, usually give ice cream a very smooth so-called mouthfeel sensations when we eat them, texture, and also body to the ice cream and creaminess, and also another important characteristics on flavor release. And if one take a look at functions of the fat itself, so for ice cream mess, the majority of its functions is actually the building block for the ice cream three-dimensional structure. So one of the most important functions of ice cream fat is actually stabilize the air cell structure. So if we dye the color of fat and start to look at microscope of structures of three-dimensional structures of ice cream, you are going to see that it actually helps to capture air bubble within the ice cream structure. So that is why for ice cream product, if you want to enjoy or if you enjoy soft ice cream, such as soft cone ice cream, air play a very important role. Okay, and in order to introduce air into ice cream, they require fat globule to so-called cover the air bubble. And on top of that, of course, it also helps to interact between protein and emulsifier in ice cream system so that it provides a smooth texture. And it also gives ability of ice cream to during productions of ice cream such as whipping and churning. So if let's say you want to fill ice cream into a tub, then fat play a role to flow the ice cream ingredients all into the tub. So if you, from physical point of view, in actual fact, ice cream is a very complex product of food. So fat help us to give ice cream a good eating quality. So of course, I would like to quickly share with you first the structures of ice cream in a microscopic behavior before I explain further. If you take a look at the ice cream mesh structures like this particular structure, so we have ice crystal. Ice crystal usually because it is a blast freezing process, rapid freezing. So ice crystals usually not big, small ice crystal form. But if you look at air bubble, these are air bubbles. So air bubbles, sometimes the structures can be usually slightly bigger than ice crystals. So if you take a look at those brown tiny brown spot surrounding air bubble, this is actually fat globule or so-called three-dimensional fat crystals. Okay, so they have the ability to capture the air bubble. So it is actually not ice, or it is not protein, it is not emulsifier. It is also not flavoring that help in assisting the maintaining the three-dimensional structures of air bubble. It is always fat. So that make fat an important ingredients. Although it is only 5 to 15%, majority of ice cream is still ice, but that give very unique properties of to ice cream. And I'm sure if I ask you to imagine, if one can imagine ice cream, yeah. So if you want to see or feel ice cream so-called without fat, then when we are small, sometimes our parents or we go out and we buy Malay, we call ice cream potong. I'm not sure, have you heard about ice cream potong? They will use the plastic bag to fill so-called syrup into that, and then they are going to tighten the end and freeze it in a freezer. Are you all familiar with this product?
Yes.
Yes. So that is actually just sugar and water and perhaps some flavoring, or depending, maybe you have some plum or some juices as well, or cordial. And the texture is very different. I'm sure you experienced that. That is basically ice only. So that is, in actual fact, uh, if you want to take a look at ice cream texture without fat, that will be most likely that kind of texture. So I'm sure it is not nice compared to ice cream. So therefore, children nowadays still prefer the real ice cream rather than the ice bottle. So fat play extremely important role, although it is only about 5 to 10% for ice cream mass, and that fat nowadays is no longer using milk fat, because milk fat perhaps due to volume is small compared to vegetable fat. So we replace it a lot with vegetable fat. So palm-based fat is still heavily used in ice cream mass production, so to replace milk fat. So, well, of course, you can also hydrogenated soybean oil or canola oil or sunflower oil and use it for ice cream, but that will also eventually cost more compared to if you only use palm oil. Most likely, if you're using palm oil as a milk fat replacer, you don't need to really go through hydrogenation. You can still get a good property to replace the milk fat. So, and these vegetable fats nowadays is preferred to compare to milk fat from many different perspective. One, of course, the cost to use vegetable fat is cheaper compared to if you are using milk fat. That is one of the reasons why many of our tub ice cream, the one that you buy in the box, a square box, and so on, is usually very cheap nowadays, mainly because they are all using palm-based fat rather than milk fat. And that gives industry an opportunity to produce ice cream in larger quantity, while compared to premium ice cream where the volume usually is small. One thing is because eventually the price will be expensive and not everyone can afford it. So for mass market, usually vegetable fat are frequently used. On top of that, now vegetable fat have a better nutritional, not to say nutritional quality. Perhaps fatty acid compositions are the same, but compared to milk fat, vegetable fat doesn't have cholesterol level compared to milk fat, and that is considered slightly healthier option compared to milk fat, right? So in order for ice cream mass to have the optimum quality, one of the major functions of specialty fats in ice cream is actually act as a lubricant. So the fat will act as a lubricant and melt properly during eating. So because of ice cream temperature is low, and when we consume it in our mouth, our temperature, mouth temperature or cavity temperature will also drop, usually about 2 to 5 degrees Celsius. So milk fat, vegetable fat that we use it in ice cream mass production usually have the melting point of about 30 to 34 degrees Celsius. Okay, maximum that you can go. So that will give a good eating sensation. At the same time, like what I showed before, the microscopic photo of an ice cream, it is beside act as a lubricant. Specialty fat in ice cream mass also act as a structure builder. So it provides ice cream three-dimensional structure to hold air and then make ice cream having a very smooth and mouthfeel sensation. So our ice bottom will not have that kind of texture. So ice bottom, no matter how you beat them, they were not able to capture air bubble. So you can try at home. If you don't trust me, you can make your own ice bottom at home and try to beat and introduce bubble into it. So you can never have ability to capture bubble. All right. Without ability to capture air bubble inside ice cream mass, creating tiny air bubble, then you will not have smooth texture. So this is which I already explained to you. Okay. So the more air bubble that you like to have in ice cream, for example, soft ice cream. So soft ice cream fat content is actually relatively high, depending on the amount of air bubble you want to introduce. So if you go to MACD, I'm not sure how much now is the soft cone ice cream from MACD or Family Mart. I know these are some prefer store that you buy your soft cone ice cream. How much is a soft cone ice cream now? Anyone having any idea?
RM1 more.
Yes?
RM1 more for McDonald's Sunday.
So, so everyone agree it is RM1 more than that, about slightly more than RM1, 1 to 2 ringgit, yeah? So, you know, just deviate a bit, talked about MACD approach on soft ice cream, yeah? If you take a look at soft ice cream locations, usually at the prime area, MACD going to put up the machine, soft ice cream machine. That machine actually is expensive. As the technology involved make that machine expensive, especially the need to introduce air bubble into the system. So machine-wise, it's expensive, and yet MACD sell it at relatively cheaper pricing. The main idea is actually to attract customer going into MACD. So therefore, they don't mind to have very slim margin to sell it at that cheap price. Okay, so last one for ice cream mass, functions of specialty fat is as flavor carrier. Many different fat, many different flavor of food product usually carry by fat. Fat is the best. Fat is the best carrier of flavor. So therefore, if you take a look at, especially for animal kingdom, yeah, if you take a look at chicken flavor, beef flavor, or pork lard flavor, and so on. So they are all usually captured in the adipose tissue. So for chicken, it is underneath the skin, the yellow fat that give you a very rich chicken flavor. All right. So because of that reasons, specialty fat for ice cream mass, they also have required to have properties to carry flavor. So many of those flavor of ice cream usually dissolve first in fat before mixing it into overall formulations to form emulsions in ice cream mass. Okay, so I already shared these three-dimensional structures with you. So next is ice cream coating. All right, ice cream coating is a little bit more trickier than this fat for ice cream mass. Yeah, fat for ice cream coating need to have very unique properties. So comparing to ice cream mass, the amount of fat is actually only about 5 to 15%. But for coating, it is at least half of it, usually about 40 to 60% of the overall coating. All right. So, and this will give the coating hardness, melting behavior, brittleness, and flavor release. So many of these type of specialty fat require a very specific functions. For example, they will need to be solidified within short period of time. So have you all seen how any documentary or any YouTube on the productions of ice cream products such as the one I show in this particular slide? How they dip into coating, ice cream coating, and remove the ice cream mess. They dip into coating and then they take it out. Have you all seen that kind of video before?
Yes.
Yes, yeah. So I'm sure you have experience watching such mass productions of ice cream coating, just like the one that I show in this particular slide. So for that, you need to imagine, yeah, in the production house for ice cream, how what kind of property of the fat that you must have. So once the ice cream mass, let's say this particular white body, yeah, ice cream mass, dip into a melted coating of ice cream. Okay, so and then they are going to remove it from the dipping very quickly. So what I'm trying to say here is that you are going to see the ice cream coating, once it touches the ice cream mass, they will solidify quite instantly. Okay, so they cannot maintain liquid for very long, because once they remove it, if they maintain liquid for a long time, they are going to slide because of gravity. They are going to slide to the bottom. So then it will create an uneven thickness of the coating. So I'm sure if you enjoy, all of us enjoy Magnum. If you enjoy Magnum, you will always observe that thickness of the coating is very homogeneous. Am I right to say that?
Yeah.
Yeah. And if you buy a cheaper non-Magnum ice cream, the coated ice cream, sometimes, I'm not sure whether you observe it, sometimes you notice that the coating is very thin layer, and sometimes at the edge, if you can refer to my cursor now, the one closer to the wooden stick is certain part of the ice cream mass is not fully covered by the coating. Can you, I mean, have you observed that kind of defect in coated ice cream when you buy from cheaper versions of those ice cream, coated ice cream? Anyone?
Yeah.
Yeah, so sometimes the at the bottom, the one that closer to the wooden stick is very thin layer, and you can see the biomass. You can see the ice cream mass body, the white ice cream mass body. But you will never see that happen to Magnum ice cream. Okay, Magnum ice cream, the coating is always covered up to the stick, the wooden stick. All right. So this is why for cheaper versions, they don't care so much about the type of specialty fat they use. They use a cheaper version specialty fat. So what the system will do is that once they dip into those ice cream coating consisting of cheaper versions of the specialty fat, once they remove it, it will not solidify very instantly. So there is a movement dripping down based on gravity. So because the machine is holding the stick and then dip into the coating, so gravity will push some of those on top of the ice cream mass closest to the wooden stick to drip. So therefore, it doesn't cover totally the bottom of the ice cream mass. So that is what we call bleeding. I'm not sure whether you observe. Have you heard about this particular terms in coated ice cream productions? Sometimes they may tell you that, oh, there is a defect and bleeding. They call bleeding. Bleeding means that certain part of the ice cream mass is not fully covered by the coating. So we call it bleeding, all right? And this is considered a defect for coated ice cream. So type of the fat that you use, specialty fat, one of the major functions is they must be able to solidify relatively quickly, okay? So what are the functions of the specialty fat? Well, if for ice cream mass, the functions of fat must be act as a good lubricant, provide structure, and also provide flavor. Okay, carry flavor with them. So while for ice cream coating, the specialty fat must have very specific melting profile or melting behavior. So the melting behavior is they must melt lower than 30 degrees, so that a coating must have a very good snap. Means that when you bite on the ice cream, it will break very easily and detach from the body or the mass of ice cream. Okay, and it must melt very rapidly and give you a very good mouthfeel sensation. So because of that, usually below 30 degrees. All right. So you can check your solid fat content to see that kind of specialty fat before you use them in the ice cream coating production. So on top of that, they must have good viscosity and also plasticity. This is also another two important properties of that specialty fat for ice cream coating if you want to use it for ice cream coating. So to simplifying the production process and also ensure the whole product is coated, which I mentioned just now. So so that the coating is very even and the thickness is even. So they must usually have relatively easy to flow and then solidify. So if not, I already mentioned bleeding will occur at the white spot, which means it is usually the ice cream mass that you observe, you have not covered it, all right? At the same time, a coating must also somewhat elastic structure in order to prevent breaking. So I'm sure if you enjoy Magnum, usually once you bite, it is going to be like snap and remove quite easily. If you buy a cheaper version of coated ice cream, sometimes when you buy the other pieces, the bigger pieces of the so-called chocolate coating will drop because or detach from the ice cream mass. Have you experienced that before?
Yes.
Yes. So sometimes when you are small, you really feel upset because to many children, the coating is more flavorful than the ice cream mass, usually because it has chocolate flavor and so on. So if it drop, then it is like rugi because you like that part so much, and sometimes once you bite, the whole pieces drop. So therefore, they must have elastic structure. So rate of solidifications is also important. Coating should have very rapid crystallizations and solidification happen so that dipping and take it out and move and pack can and pack into what I call it, packaging can be done very quickly. So we want the coating to solidify very quickly so that when you put the packaging in, it will not stain the packaging. It will straight solidify. Okay, and of course, just like the ice cream mess, fat also act as a carrier of fat for flavor. So especially coating, usually we want it to be rich in like chocolate flavor or green tea flavor coating, or white chocolate coating. So we want them to carry a good flavor, and it must release very easily once the coating melt in our mouth. Okay. The last part of the ice cream is actually dipping and also topping. So I'm sure sometimes when you go to those specialty ice cream store, you buy scoop, one scoop or two scoop or three scoop, so ice cream. So sometimes the shopkeeper will ask you, do you want coating or not, or do you want topping or not? Okay. So sometimes the topping can be peanut, or can be some maybe strawberry coating, strawberry topping, and most of the time it is a chocolate coating, right? So or topping. So that topping, if it is fat-based topping, usually must also contain or use of specialty fats. So they should usually maintain at room temperature to be liquid. So you see, you go into those specialty ice cream store, so they will have a lot of those like compartment filled with those topping. So at room temperature, it is liquid. So once you buy 2 scoop and you say you want to add that topping in, they will need to scoop it and straight away pour it into their scoop of ice cream, 1 or 2 scoop of ice cream. So once it touches ice cream, then it requires solidification very quickly. So because we don't want consumer to complain, can you imagine you buy 2 scoop of ice cream and you want to add topping because you pay for it? Let's say you want the topping, and the topping initially at room temperature is liquid. So when you pour into it, it is still liquid and melted your scoop of ice cream. I'm sure you're going to be very angry with a shock. So once touches scoop of ice cream, usually it must straight away solidify and coat the scoop ice cream evenly and nicely. So on top of that, usually the shopkeeper will quickly put in some shredded peanut, or it can be hazelnut or whatever on top of it, okay, to make it look nice. Okay, so because usually those toppings stay in the store for a long period of time at liquid temperature exposed to air, so it cannot be use soft oil like soybean oil, sunflower oil, rapeseed, although they may be able to maintain the topping at room temperature to be liquid, but even touches ice cream, it will still can't solidify very quickly. So palm-based oil is still really used as specialty fat for topping. All right, and so that will make the topping stable for a prolonged period of time and less problem with oxidations, comparing that you have a lot of PUFA fatty acid in that topping that for prolonged storage, for prolonged operations in the store, that you need to maintain the topping to be in liquid form, and at the end of the day, perhaps it's already oxidized, and consumer may detect it when they eat the topping together with the ice cream. So the product should have very low viscosity and liquid at room temperature, but they must be able to set very rapidly and solidify. Okay, must be stable against oxidations because it was usually kept at room temperature in liquid form. Melt off properties so that when you eat it together with ice cream, they will melt together with ice cream and you will not stay solid, so that the sensations of eating is there and good flavor release as well. So when these requirements are met, usually it will give you a glossy surface, crispy coating, or also a good snack. All right. So, and another very important functions for dipping or topping is actually act as a moisture barrier for many cone ice cream. All right. Have you seen cone ice cream? Have you seen, like, I'm sure you buy cone ice cream before from store, and it usually cone ice cream, you are observed for waffle cone ice cream that you buy from 7-Eleven and so on. So it can be from Walls, it can be from any brand, yeah. That is actually a coating or dipping of so-called spray of a layer of chocolate. Usually we call it chocolate layer. Have you observed that or not?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but of course, it is not made up of cocoa butter. It is still using specialty fat with cocoa mass. Yeah. So, and usually for cone ice cream, yeah. If I ask you for opinion, most of us will fight for the bottom part. Am I right or not?
Yeah.
Why you fight for the bottom part?
The best part.
Yes, I can't hear you.
The most delicious part.
Yeah, all of us think that it is the most delicious because it always have very thick portions of chocolate. Am I right?
Yes.
Yeah. So, but of course, it is not it is not real chocolate. It is specialty fat with cocoa mass and so on. So, but do you know why at the bottom there is such a certain height of chocolate? Have you asked why? You think that the ice cream producer purposely put extra chocolate for you?
No.
Then why at the bottom there is a relatively thick height of those chocolate?
To prevent moisture.
Yes, like what I mentioned before, to prevent moisture, but they can have very thin, I mean, sufficient amount, a little bit only sufficient to prevent moisture. So why usually if it is of certain height, okay? So that brought down to how they introduce this coating in manufacturing of the cone, the wafer. So usually once they bake the cone, I mean, the cone shape come out, they are going to spray a layer on top of this particular cone. They spray a layer of this coating, and temperature is a little bit high when they spread it. So they are going to let it drip until the bottom. So they will spray extra so that it will coat the overall portions of this wafer. Without this coating, you are going to have ended up with soggy cone ice cream. Do you know what I mean by soggy?
Yeah.
Which means that the wafer is soft. So usually, previously, when I'm sure you buy ice cream, the cone ice cream on is still a layer of ice cream of certain height on top of the cone. Am I right? Yeah. So sometimes, yeah, the cone at the edge, at the top edge, is significantly soggy. Have you all observed that or not? It's soft. The wafer is a bit soft at the edge, at the top part of the ice cream, of the cone ice cream. Have you observed that or not when you buy from store or supermarket?
Yes.
Yeah. So do you know why?
Because our saliva.
Again?
Because of our saliva.
No, because of course no, because ice cream. If you take a look at the structures of the cone ice cream, the cone, the wafer is of this height. Usually, industry going to fill up on top of it a bit, right, with the ice cream mass. So at the edge of coating, at the edge of wafer, usually they are not properly coated with this chocolate layer. So when it touches the ice cream mass, so ice cream mass have a lot of moisture, and that wafer by default is a starch is going to start to absorb moisture. So therefore, you start to see at the edge, it is soggy. So, but ice cream producer have already technology to overcome this. So nowadays, if you tomorrow if you have the money and also time, you go and buy one cone ice cream, you're going to see that at the edge of the wafer now, they also coat it with this chocolate coating until you see the chocolate coating overflow till the edge of the wafer. So this prevent migrations of moisture from the ice cream mass to the coating now. So nowadays, if you buy a branded cone ice cream, usually even at the top part of the wafer, it is still crispy. Okay, do you understand what I'm trying to explain here? Because I don't have ability to draw it, we are not having the physical class, so I explain it in this way. Can you all understand what I'm trying to say here?
Yeah.
Yes, right? Yeah. So the coating at the bottom, why it is relatively thick is because industrial very pantang of moisture migrations to the wafer. So they want to make sure all part of the wafer is coated with this coating. So they spray extra at the top. When gravity bring it down at the end, at the bottom, usually you will have solidifications of extra chocolate. So therefore, everyone fight for that extra chocolate. All right. So in this particular product, specialty fat is important to act as a barrier for moisture. So therefore, I mentioned in sometimes dipping and topping, one of the functions of the specialty fats is actually to act as barrier for moisture. So this will prevent migrations of water from the ice cream mass to the cone, okay, or the wafer, so that it will maintain good eating quality. All right. So with that, I end this topic. Do you have any questions that you would like to ask me now? Any questions? No?
No, doctor.
Okay. If not, we move on to next topic on downstream product technology. Yeah? We will go into no longer concentrate just on refined oil or specialty oil. We will go a little bit more on some of the more important fats and oil product. The majority of the product is makeup of oil or fats. Okay, so in this particular part, we will talk about spreads or margarine. All right, margarine is a big industry of fats and oil, especially for palm oil. So I already mentioned modifications of refined oil. Refined oil have very limited applications. Therefore, we usually require to go through modifications. After this downstream processing technology, we're going to go to the one of the important topic, which is modifications of fat. Okay, so we will learn in a more detailed manner hydrogenations, interesterifications, fractionations. Okay, so for these reasons, modifications is usually a help to improve physical or improve chemical properties of edible oils further for very specific applications. So I already mentioned this also in specialty fats that can be carried out either by blending, which is the simplest modification process, blend oil A and oil B together so you get another properties, or fractionations or hydrogenations or interesterifications. Okay, so for this downstream processed products, I will talk about spreadable products, cooking oil, vanaspati and ghee. Okay, so spreadable, spread is not a commonly used word in Malaysia. We usually call very straightforward, we call margarine or butter, but in other part of the world, usually they call spread or they call spreadable product. All right. So first we will go through spreadable products. And the term yellow fat spreads are sometimes called spreads. We refer to any product such as butter, margarine, and their low-fat alternative. Okay, low-fat means that they have much lower fat content than the usual butter or margarine. So what is, if someone asks you, what is the fat content of a typical butter or margarine? Anyone? Anyone? What is the typical fat content of a butter or margarine? %, yes. 80% is a typical or ordinary butter and margarine. It is always 80%. All right. Then if someone say I have a low fat spread, then they are talking about much lower than 80%. All right. So of course, butter is from animal, while margarine is an alternative to butter. All right. So let us take a look at a bit of the history of spreadable products. Actually, butter having very long history, already developed more than 5,000 years ago. Always you heard some of those historians talk about discovery of butter. Someone carry a pack of milk with them, going with camel, move around. So because of agitations, then at the end of their journey, they found out that there is a separation of solid from the milk, and that solid is actually milk fat, or eventually they develop it into butter. But for vegetable-based spreads, the inventions of margarine, it is relatively new. So the French chemist invented this product back in 1869. So the original margarine is very different from the margarine that all of us enjoy nowadays. In 1869, when this French chemist Maurice invented this margarine, it is actually not called. The French chemists have in mind to produce something to mimic butter, and the chemist actually call it a butterine instead of margarine. So the word back in 1869 is butterine, butter with R-I-N-E, butterine, not margarine. So he utilized, instead of milk fat, he utilized beef tallow oiling, which means the adipose tissues of beef, extract the oil out of it, and he add 10% of milk and some water and 0.4% of other tissue as flavor. You know what is other tissues? If you look at the female cow, the lactation part, so he will cut a bit of the tissues because of flavor, for the butter flavor. So that is actually the original 1869 compositions of the inventions of this French chemist. So he patented this mix, and he called it butterine. Okay. And eventually, people develop another version using this particular pattern, using vegetable fat to replace the beef tallow oiling. So that vegetable fat spread is eventually called margarine. Okay, but the patented process and the patented product by French chemists is actually called butterine, right? So nowadays, we have actually many different versions of spreads. So I give you this diagram, this photo to illustrate to you the low-fat spread. So a typical butter, if you follow my arrow, this particular jar is a typical butter, have 80% of fat. So per tablespoon is about 11 grams of fat, while margarine also have 80% of fat. The only difference is margarine is using vegetable fat. So you can have 70% of vegetable spread. You can also have 53. You can also have 40% of fat. So these are all low-fat spreads. My next questions, if you take a look at the pricing of low-fat spreads, I would like to ask you questions now. Yeah? Do you think that the low-fat spreads, is it cheaper or more expensive than a margarine? Looking at the composition.
I think low fat is cheaper.
Why do you think so?
Because the high amount of fat, maybe extra.
Yeah, all of us always have in mind that low spread fats have less fat. Fat is more expensive than water. So therefore, in terms of ingredient usage, a typical 80% fat margarine should be more expensive than low fat spread. Am I right? Yes or no? To have such a perception.
Yeah.
Yeah, but in actual fact, when you go into supermarket and take a look at those low-fat spreads, sometimes the pricing is more expensive than margarine. So we always start to wonder why it is so. The issue here is that the technology to produce a stabilized low-fat spread is actually more expensive than a typical 80% margarine. Because can you imagine you have such a high amount of moisture or such a high amount of water in low spreads, low fat spreads. So because of that, this type of emulsions are not stable if you are just using normal mixing to mix it like a margarine. It will not form a stable product. So the technology involved, the machine involved in producing a stable, low fat spread is usually more expensive and requires slightly more emulsifier to stabilize the whole system. So that will most of the time cause low fat spreads to be more expensive, okay, than the typical margarine. All right. So I would like to also share with you historically how we use and what kind of spreads that we have in the market. All right. So market and usage. If you take a look at margarine or spreads or butter, we usually don't take a teaspoon or tablespoon of butter or margarine or any spreads and put into our mouth and consume it just like that. It is not common. Just like cooking oil, we never take a tablespoon and then drink it. We never take fat and oil in such a way. Okay, it is common for you to take to drink milk, to take cereal product and so on. But for fat and oil, usually it require a host. So for spreads, usually the host is bread, biscuit, vegetables, yeah, depending on how we deal with it. In US, I'm not sure whether you watch, I'm sure you watch a lot of TV drama or Hollywood movie, and they like to use spread for cooking vegetable, for saute the vegetable. Have you all observed such a way that US they like to always put in the butter a piece of butter, or if you look at the way that they cook, or piece of vegetable spreads or margarine in a hot pan, and then they will put in their broccoli or whatever veg. So they don't usually use cooking oil, they use spreads. So therefore, the host for spreads in that sense is vegetable. But most of the time, butter and margarine, the host is actually bread or biscuit, right? So that make productions of spreads required to fulfill the behavior of the bread or biscuit. All right. So, and why I say so, because how, for example, the hardness of spreads very much depends on the hardness of the host. So Malaysia, we like soft white bread. Am I right to say that? Our bread are soft. Am I right to say that? Your Gardenia,
Yes.
your Maximus, these are all soft bread. Do you know why we like soft bread?
Because we don't like to choose the
Because we get that inherited from British colonization. British like soft bread. So they introduced soft bread to us. Bread is not Asian diet initially, yeah. So because of that, in actual fact, British table spread is usually not hard because the bread that they enjoy is soft. But in other part of the world, like Germany, like French, their bread is hard. So in that sense, their spreads can be hard, just like, you know, the French, they have baguette, which is very hard. You can use it as a weapon. It is hard. So that the spread can be hard as well. So to apply it, it will not deform the bread. That will not deform the bakery product. While for Malaysia scenario, yeah, our margarine usually make up of palm-based fat. Yeah, because of that, our margarine is relatively hard. So I'm sure you have experience when you were small, you are giving a margarine for you to apply on the bread. What will happen to the bread? If you take a knife, you apply margarine on your bread. If the margarine you just take it out from the fridge, usually it's hard. So when you apply on the soft bread, what will happen to the soft bread?
Goya. Calm.
Either Goya or it will Kame. Am I right? So that is because although we enjoy soft bread, but our margarine is a bit too hard once you remove it. So unless you want to wait until it is relatively soft, then you applied it. So in many parts of the world, the spreads fat composition is very much depending on the host itself, how the country consume together with the host. So like I mentioned in Germany and also in French, their bread are harder than the typical bread that we enjoy or British enjoy. So therefore, their spread can be much harder in terms of texture. To them, it's okay. So, and also, and on top of that, we enjoy our spreads with a bit of salt. Am I right to say that? Most of our butter and margarine are salted. So why do you think that we like salted margarine or salted butter?
Because we want it to be spreadable on the plate.
Yes. Again?
Because we want it to be spreadable on the plate.
Salt is to provide to enhance the flavor, yeah. So but it is again because of UK influence. UK introduced salted butter and salted soft top spread to us, so therefore we accustomed to butter or margarine with added of salt. So by in majority part, let's say in Germany, I stayed there for a year. I always see that majority of the spreads are no no additions of salt. So it is without salt. So which means that for that country, they prefer not to add salt Okay, so depending on very much how a nation traditionally consumes spirits. So therefore, because it requires hosts, so the application side is very much depending on how you apply it or use it together with hosts. So it's difficult to come up with a universally accepted compositions of spirits or margarine, because like in US, I mentioned, traditionally they always like to coat their vegetable with a yellow fat or spirit, so they can stir fry their vegetable together with a scoop of butter. They will cut a piece of butter, put it in hot pan, or they will cut a piece of margarine, put it in hot pan. And with that kind of setting, low fat spread, vegetable spread is not very popular in US, mainly because if you have too high water content, if you put into a hot pan together that you have together with fat, what will happen to that particular product once it touches hot pan with elevated temperature? You are going to have, say, spark, because water don't like to mix with oil or fat. So that will injure the consumer. So because of that, in US, usually the spirits have a minimum amount of water, similar to butter compositions. Okay, so and nowadays the demand for spirit is increasingly high because many parts of the world now start to venture into Western diet, and they are eating more and more Western products. So demand now for China market, for example, is also very high because they start to consume bread, bakery product in larger quantities. So spirits are heavily used now, okay, in that country. So in order to design a perfect yellow spirit is not easy, because you cannot ask consumer to let you know, oh, you want to apply, you you cannot ask consumer that, oh, you do you want to apply it in soft bread or hard bread, or you want to use it for stir fry the veggie and so on. So and you ask them to buy 3-4 different type of fat spreads cater for different applications of host, so your consumer will get very angry with you. So your consumer always like us, we want to buy one thing and apply it to all kind of applications. So to produce spreads that universally apply in all kind of hosts is not that easy, which I already give you example like bread. It can be harder texture, soft bread, like us, we like soft bread. Certain country like harder bread. So, so these are very much different hosts or property of hosts that eventually you can't really produce a single fat spread and cater for all kind of hosts. So what industry usually do, they are going to depending on the most frequently used hosts and use it as an reference for them to produce hosts according to for them to produce fat spread according to that particular major use host. Okay, so this is already mentioned. In UK, Sweden and UK, they like highly sorted spreads. What Holland or Netherlands, Germany, they like very light or no, totally no salt at all, unsalted. Okay, So nowadays, butter is reducing in demand while vegetable fat spread is increasing in demand. Of course, one of the major issue is because of pricing. So many bakery products now, in terms of for costing purpose, they prefer to use margarine compared to butter, and that make vegetable fat spread becoming more and more popular and overtake the butter as one of the heavily consumed fat spreads. Okay. So how to produce fat spreads? I usually like to ask these particular questions in final exams. So I hope that you will put a little bit more effort into how we can produce, what kind of processes involved in the productions of spreads. So usually if step by step is require mixing of all ingredients, then that mixing will produce emulsified products. Once it turns into emulsified product, you need to cool down the temperature of the emulsion so that the fat will start to crystallize. And once you have first fat crystals in the chilling process, then the fat crystals will grow in size. And once the fat crystals grow in size, you cannot let them continuously grow. So you will need to have some design of a machine to break the fat crystals into smaller fat crystals so that at the end of your process, after resting, your product will have a better glossy surface. If you open up a can of planta, for example, usually on the surface it is shining. So that is what industry trying to produce. They want you to have look at the newly opened can of planta provide a shining surface. Yeah. So I will first perhaps show you this particular diagram. Then later I will show you a video very quickly. Yeah. So that you have some idea how spreads of margarine are produced. So let me explain this diagram first. So you have oil. It can be palm oil and palm stearin combinations. Spreads of margarine will need to have emulsifier because you have 20%. No, you have about 16% of water. So most of our margarine in Malaysia is salted margarine, which means that they add salt into it. So salt is water soluble, so they are going to dissolve in water. So you dose sodium chloride solutions in water. All right. Well, if you look at my arrow now, we have oil. So the oil, part of it will be used to dissolve the emulsifier MAG, the monoacylglycerol or monoglycerides. And part of it may also use to dissolve the additive. So you have salt, you have emulsifier. What are the other ingredients that we add into our margarine? Anyone? That are fat soluble. You dissolve it in using oil. Anyone? What are other additives? Again, it's not very clear, sorry. Flavoring, yes, we add flavoring. Some more? Coloring, yes, we add coloring. We also sometimes enrich it with vitamin. Our margarine compulsory fortifications of vitamin D, vitamin E, so sometimes you see in the label. Coloring, we usually add carotenoid into it, the yellow fat color. So these are all additive. Malaysia, we don't need to add vitamin D, but we add vitamin A or E into it. But in other part of the world, a table spreads is frequently compulsory by law to add vitamin D, especially to enter once the country enter into autumn or winter seasons. So for many countries with very long winter seasons, I observe during autumn, they start to launch product or spreads with vitamin D enrichment. Why? Because many elderly in those countries during winter, they don't come out and have very little opportunity to be exposed to sunlight. Even when they come out, it is winter. You cannot ask elderly during winter come out to enjoy sun bath, wear very little clothes and exposed to the sun. That is not possible. It is winter. So they are all fully covered. So with that, elderly have problem with vitamin D deficiency for country with prolonged winter season. So those countries usually they will ask spread producer, fat spread producer to add vitamin D prior to usually slightly before winter, autumn seasons. You start to see those table spread launch to the market and stay until almost the end of the beginning of spring. Okay, then you don't need to add it because people start to enjoy going out and expose themselves to sun. But Malaysia, we don't seems to have problem, and vitamin D is not required. So D is important for bone, bone for elderly to help in the absorptions of calcium. So D is a very important element. So back to this particular slide. So you start to see that those part of it to dissolve it, those fat-soluble ingredient, monoglycerides prefer, although it is an emulsifier, they may like water, but they prefer to stay in oil. So you dissolve it in oil and together with vitamin calorie flavoring, and you introduce it to the mixing tank, plus whatever remaining amount of fat or oil, because it's margarine, for example, is 80% of fat, yeah? So water, you also dose it in. What is the functions of nitrogen tank here? Anyone? Yes. So when they receive the oil, they will need to prevent oxidation. So they need to blanket the empty space with nitrogen. All right. And then after mixing, they will add additional water to make up of 16% of water, or they may add more depending on what will be the type of spread they want to produce. If they want to produce soft spread or low-fat spreads, then they may need to dose more water into it. And then feeding tanks, before they pump it to crystallization piping to form so-called fat crystals, and they will have a softening pipe to break the big fat crystal into smaller fat crystals so that the product will have, the margarine will have smooth texture and also ability to reflect light. Okay, so I will share with you one video. I hope that it is clear and you can hear the sound. Let me try. Can you hear the sound just now? Yes or no?
Doctor, you try to play it again.
Again?
Doctor, you try to play the video.
Can you hear the sound just now?
No, doctor, there's no sound.
There's no sound. Hold on now. Let me check. I always make such a... Okay. Let me see what is the problem. Okay. Can you hear it?
Yes.
Okay, let us take a look at this video. It's from MPOB, yeah?
Margarine is basically an emulsion of water in fat, resembling butter in appearance, character, and composition. The fatty phase is normally a mixture of vegetable and/or animal oils and fats, and the aqueous phase skim milk or water, or a mixture of them. Small quantities of other ingredients, such as salt, flavors, and emulsifiers, may be incorporated through either of the phases. There are various types of margarine for specific applications, of which the most popular are table or tub, industrial, and pastry margarines. Margarine is universally formulated to contain 80% fat and 16% water. A number of other ingredients, either water or fat-soluble, may be added to impart taste, flavor, and aroma, and to enhance its physical, chemical, and nutritional properties. Water-soluble ingredients include salt and preservatives, while fat-soluble ingredients are emulsifiers, lecithin, antioxidants, flavor, natural coloring compounds, and vitamins. Manufacturing process. Ingredients such as salt, emulsifier, coloring agent, flavoring agent, and antioxidants are weighed accordingly. This is normally done at 60 to 70 degrees Celsius. A homogeneous melt is ensured by continuous stirring in a mixing vessel. The water-soluble ingredients are dissolved in a small volume of water made up to the final volume, which constitutes 16% by weight of the margarine. The mixture, or the aqueous phase, will be added to the fat phase. Emulsifiers, such as mono and diglycerides, depending on the type of margarine, and lecithin, should be first dissolved in a small volume of the oil and fat blend, preferably in the ratio of 1 to 4 at 65 degrees Celsius to 70 degrees Celsius. The mixture is then incorporated into the main bulk of the oil and fat blend in the tank under continuous stirring at temperature ranging from 50 to 60 degrees Celsius. Other fat-soluble ingredients, such as antioxidant, color, and flavor, are dispersed in a small volume of the fat blend and mixed into the main body of fat. This is also done at 50 to 60 degrees Celsius under continuous stirring to homogenize the mixture. The mixture of fat phase is now ready for mixing with the aqueous phase. The prepared aqueous phase is incorporated into the fat phase under continuous stirring at a controlled temperature of 50 to 60 degrees Celsius, forming into homogeneous water-in-oil emulsion in the emulsion or mixing tank. A temperature between 10 to 22 degrees Celsius and a scraper speed of 300 to 1000 RPM are maintained in the pre-crystallizer. With the big temperature drop, crystallization occurs rapidly. Time is required for full crystallization, and the pin worker allows the margarine to do so under agitation by the rotating pins. The rotating pins help to crystallize the pre-crystallized emulsion and homogenize the fat. The margarine is collected from the pin worker and packed in different forms, depending on the type, product consistency, and consumer preference. Tempering at 5 to 7 degrees Celsius for 24 hours stabilizes the texture of soft-type margarine. Higher temperature is needed for enhancing plasticity of baking and pastry margarines. Tempering at about 2 degrees Celsius above the melting points of these margarines for more than 24 hours is normally carried out to obtain margarines with good plasticity. The right packaging material and transportation temperature are crucial factors in the quality of the final product. Advantages of using palm oil formulations. Palm oil also contains 10% linoleum, available in various hardness.
So I would like to highlight one designer. We call it B unit. Later I will share with you. And
pin worker allows the margarine to do so under agitation by the rotating pins. The rotating pins help to crystallize the pre-crystallized emulsion and homogenize the fat.
so now, can all of you hear me?
Yes,
Can. This pin design is very important to get homogenized emulsions and also fat crystals. So if you look at the rotations of this pin,
The margarine under agitation by
so that is one area which is fixed. The pin is actually is like you can imagine comb, yeah, your sikat, your comb, yeah. One angle it is fixed, while this three what they call it pin setup, which is 90 degrees to each other, will rotate, while this particular, follow my arrow, this is fixed. This is a very important design because it is where they allow fat crystals to crystallize and form fat crystals, but yet they maintain the fat crystals at a certain size because they will break larger fat crystals and eventually homogenize the whole system. All right, this is an important setup. We call it B unit. All right, I will share with you now. Can you see the slide now?
yes, teacher.
Okay, so the manufacturing of this margarine usually first is require homogenizations, emulsification process, which you see in the video. We constantly stir. Okay, the machine constantly stir while the staff is adding the emulsions and adding ingredients into the system and maintaining temperature. at about usually 50 to 60 in that video they mentioned. This is a typical temperature work for palm-based product, because at that temperature, majority of the fat portions, 80% of that fat will be already in melted form. Okay, you require initially to be in melted form so that every ingredients will be so-called emulsified or homogenized in a nice way. Then eventually they go into the crystallization to form fat crystals. The fat crystals usually, it will not stay in that crystallizer for long period of time. Once fat crystals form, they are going to pump it into the B unit, the working unit. Yeah, that you see the pin. That pin compartment is also cool down to a certain temperature for continuous crystallizations. And this particular B unit is the most expensive unit of a margarine machine due to the design of the pin-like structure. So they are going to one area going to rotate, another pin is going to be permanently fixed feature in that machine, and the whole compartment is jacketed with cooling agent so that crystals will start or continuously grow after you pump in from the margarine crystallizer. Okay, just now you see one margarine crystallizer before they pump into this particular working unit. We call it B unit. Yeah, and this will ensure that the fat crystals is grow in size, but yet break down so that the fat crystals will eventually be homogeneous in terms of sizing. Yeah, and then you start to see them filling it into the plastic container, and it requires continue storage at certain temperature depending on type of the table spread that you want to produce. So this is what we call tempering process, so that to get a stable margarine. All right. So if you have a lot of water in your system for low fat spreads, let's say just now the diagram that I shared with you, we have almost like only 40% of oil. The remaining majority of them, close to 60%, is water. In that kind of design, or in that kind of ingredients list, you are going to see that instead of producing water in oil emulsions, you are actually producing oil in water, because water is the major part. Oil will be in the dispersed, the droplet phase. This is not acceptable for margarine. Margarine or table spreads must be water in oil. Oil is a continuous phase. So because of that, they will need to work a little bit more in that design so that it will reverse from oil in water emulsion system to water in oil emulsions for very high water level table spreads, the one that low fat table spreads. That make the process much more expensive to produce and give us a more expensive products, although the fat content is low. All right. So water in oil emulsions are cooled down in the scrap wall, which you already see just now. And during that time, you start to see fat crystals start to form, crystallize and form fat crystals. Then they are going to push it to the working unit. This working unit is the pin-like unit. And usually that unit is what we call the B unit, okay? And eventually crystallizations is going to continue until you get a homogeneous margarine fat crystals. Nowadays, the whole system are computerized, and MPOB have one unit of pilot scale unit of margarine machine. So many refinery in Malaysia, when they want to develop table spreads, they can actually pay a small amount of money and develop it in MPOB. That machine is actually already almost like 15 years machine, yeah. So up to now, still functioning very well. I think it's a Danish machine, if I'm not mistaken. All right. So I'm going to stop here. It's already 8:50. We will continue our lecture next Monday at 8. I'm going to share the link with you, the Zoom link with you. Do you have any questions to ask me?
Yes, Prof, I have a
Yeah.
question.
Please.
On 3rd of the July, we have an exam which is PD and then on the 4th of the July we have 2 exams. Is it possible if we request to maybe would you mind we request to change the exam date of the Fat and Oil Technology?
Want to bring it to June now?
No. Bring it to July, maybe a few more days after that, because it's quite packed for us.
Why
But-
only my paper you want to change? Other paper you wouldn't want to ask them to change?
Because the paper involves 60 students and then involve 2 lecturers. So we think Prof Tan is very good for us to communicate.
So I am easy to negotiate. So when our exam is actually on the, let me check.
4th of July.
Yeah, 4th of July, right? Okay, so you mentioned that 3rd of July you have a paper and
PD.
also PD. 4th of July you have 2 paper, is it?
Include this one, include Fat and Oil.
Okay. So everyone agree to change.
Depends on doctor. If doctor okay, then okay.
So I will need to check with Bahagian Academic. Yeah, I cannot promise. I don't know whether they will score me or not. So never mind. I will check with them. I will let you know. Okay. So if I change it to 5th, okay.
Okay.
Okay, better maybe 5th or 6th. Okay lah.
Okay.
Okay.
So let me check with them. I will get back to you. We still have time now. I mean, it's still, we have yet to enter June. Okay. So I will let you know. Yeah.
Okay, doctor.
Okay. So
Okay,
if
thank you,
there's-
doctor.
If there's no
Thank you,
questions, thank you very
doctor.
much. Good night. Bye bye.
Thank you, Prof. Thank you, Prof.
Thank you. Bye. Good night, Prof.
Bye.